One of the comments I often read about using fighters in the gold lane is the lack of late game damage and comeback potential. And in this game, we really got crushed the whole time, mainly because we got poisoned by Akai. He was picked last, and it turned out to be a super solid pick since all of us got heavily countered. As you can see, even in the early game, there were already 4 enemies in the gold lane, so I was really at a disadvantage. But when the enemies left the gold lane and only the Marksman was left, I immediately went in. He almost killed me, but luckily I managed to escape. Still, he kept chasing me, and in the end, I was the one who killed him. And here, all of us got wiped out. My teammates were all killed on the other side of the map, and I even went too deep while trying to kill Leslie, and the turret damage really hurt a lot. Many people say it's really hard to defend when you're losing if your team doesn't have a marksman. They think that only marksmen can quickly clear minion waves, assuming that the fighters I use in the gold lane have no damage against minions, but in reality, they can also clear minion waves efficiently, like Alucard, because he has AoE. And it's not just marksmen who are good at defending and clearing minion waves. Most of the time, the mages and junglers can also handle the wave clear. If you think about it, there might even be more mages than marksmen who are strong at defending. And by the way, our EXP laner here was too squishy, even though the enemies didn't really have burst damage, except for late game Leslie. But Uranus kept dying, even though his lane opponent was Lapu, and I think Uranus should actually have the advantage in that matchup. He used the support emblem and built Enchanted Talisman, which made him super squishy. I mean, that's fine. It's not really a bad thing. It's just that Uranus was way too aggressive in the early game with that kind of build. Good thing he eventually built some tank items in the late game and got a bit tankier. But yeah, because I really wanted to help Freya, I ended up getting caught in the mess too. At this point, the enemies were already inside our base and our top lane was already destroyed. We only had 5 kills, and 4 of those were mine. I just focused on clearing the minion waves here to prevent the mid and bottom lanes from getting pushed. Even as a fighter, wave clearing isn't really a problem. And in this game, Alucard and Freya were really hard countered by the enemy's frontliners. Look at this. Clearing the minion waves first was a huge help before trying to fight back. I actually waited for them to split up a bit, and I was about to kill Leslie here. But the enemies were already dealing so much damage, and we got wiped out right after. And it looked like the enemies were about to end the game. They were already taunting us, but they ran out of minions, and even then they were still being overconfident. 2 of my teammates already respawned here, but I still think the enemies could have ended the game if they just turret locked, but they were really overconfident. And I like how Ruby got too aggressive here, diving under the turret and taking all that turret damage. I also liked how Gord quickly cleared our minions so Ruby couldn't lifesteal from them. I don't know if Uranus was just too squishy or if Gord had too much damage. Maybe it's both. I really couldn't move at all during Akai's ultimate. The nerf to tough boots turned out to be a huge indirect buff for Akai, because now enemies are completely locked down in his ultimate. There's a very small window to escape, but it's still almost impossible to move compared to before. That's why I've been seeing Akai in tournaments lately, even though he didn't receive any direct buffs. I think all of my kills in this game were from Gord and Leslie since they're squishy, which means I was targeting the right enemies. I don't really remember killing anyone else. Even if you go back and check my previous kills and watch the whole game, it's pretty much just them. It's funny and kind of interesting when you think about it. Well, the main reason is that they were really the ones I was targeting. And the other reason is that it's really hard for Alucard to kill the other 3 enemies. But look at this. I was really focused on Gord because I knew he was the one giving us the most trouble. For me personally, it was Akai. But for the whole team, it was definitely Gord. I did manage to kill him here, even if it cost me my life. And notice how both Lapu and Akai had to use their ultimates just to take me down, which means my teammates would have the advantage if they chose to continue the fight. Good thing they were able to make the most out of what I did. And look at how Lapu already messed up here, but he's still so hard to kill. I could have killed Lapu here, but it wasn't guaranteed because of his sustain. So I just went for Leslie again. She already got a double kill, and I didn't want her to get the items she needed. That's why she was my priority target, especially since it was already late game. Marksman and Mage should always be the main targets at that point. I completely zoned out the enemy damage dealers here, and I think that's the main reason we won this team fight and got the opportunity to turn the game around. You see, that's the reason why it's so hard to use a marksman in solo ranked games. Because if your teammates don't protect you, things like that will always happen, especially if the enemies know what they're doing. And this is exactly what you should do too, when you're using a fighter that can dive into the backline and zone out the enemy damage dealers. Here's another game where we didn't have a marksman, and we were already at a disadvantage early on. And in this game, the enemy marksman actually snowballed, which should have made it even harder for us to make a comeback.
Hero resurrected.
Interestingly, I had Freya and Kimmy as teammates again. And some might say we actually had a marksman in this game and in my first game. And technically, that's true. But remember, Kimmy can be played as either a marksman or a mage. And in this game, her role was clearly a mage. And just like in the first game, our EXP laner got destroyed again, by the same enemy hero, Lapu. Their roamer was also the same as in the previous game, someone with heavy crowd control that could really make life difficult for both me and Freya. So we were really at a huge disadvantage during team fights because the enemy's skill set was built for team fights. It's the kind of lineup you'd actually see in tournaments. Meanwhile, the heroes I'm using are more suited for solo ranked games, just doing everything I can to break the dark system. And here, Tigreal was asking, why don't you guys have a marksman? He's one of those players who think that having a marksman in the gold lane would have made a difference in this game. Like, if we only had a marksman, we could have been winning. But if having a marksman on your team guarantees a win, and using a fighter in the gold lane is supposedly the reason we're losing, then why am I still winning games even without one? I actually had a 1v1 with Lancelot there, and I won. I was about to recall, but I decided to cut the lanes instead, and I started getting nervous because I knew there was a high chance the enemies would come for me. And that's exactly what happened. Now let's see what I can do in this situation. So yeah, I was basically the one who wiped out almost the entire enemy team. He's out there looking for a marksman, thinking it would have given us a huge advantage. But clearly we can still handle it, even without one. But they say marksmen are strong at defending. So let's see what difference it makes now that they're the ones on the defensive side. I just killed their mage here. It would have been a waste if I just let them go. If they're strong at defending, then the best thing to do is to eliminate them first so they can't defend at all. Makes perfect sense, right?